grief
Mm,
is like one of the most humanizing forces that connect all of us. No matter who
mm,
you are in this world, you will endure grief,
yeah.
personal, interpersonal, collective. And I feel like grief is the portal for change.
Step with care towards the precipice. Hold my hand through the dark. See the light, it is breaking. We're mothering new world.
Hello, and welcome to Mothering New Worlds, a podcast about revolutionary caregiving and world building in the midst of societal collapse and rebirth. I'm, of course, your host, Bianca Mabute-Louie. I'm an author, a sociologist, and your thought mother for this journey. I have conversations with folks who show us another world is not only possible, it's already here. Let's jump right in. For folks watching on YouTube, what do you think of my bandana? I needed a haircut yesterday, okay? It has become a dire situation. So I'm just trying to think of creative ways to look presentable for you all. Let me know what you think. And it's also free Palestine all day, every day. For folks listening, I am wearing a bandana covered in watermelons. You'll just have to tune in on YouTube. If you want to see it. But anyways, jumping into today's episode, I'm honored. I'm excited to share this conversation with you all. It is probably my most mystical, spiritual, and possibly the most personal conversation I've had yet on the podcast. My guest is Ayako Gallagher, she, they, a Japanese-Irish settler living on stolen traditional territories of the hunquemenium language group First Nations. She is a grief practitioner, an activist, speaker, potter, and bereaved mother of one in the stars and two earthside kiddos. Her work stands at the intersections of grief, collective liberation, and parenting. Ayako invites people to realize and honor that their lived experiences and grief can be catalysts for both personal and collective change. And this is not going to be the last time you hear me say this, but I truly believe that there is no mothering new world without grief and without death. And so I was really honored to explore this more deeply with Ayako. Trigger warning, we do talk about infant loss, pregnancy termination, TFMR, a new term I learned, which stands for termination for medical reasons, and we talk about medical trauma. And while these topics are obviously heavy and challenging, this conversation also felt so profoundly hopeful and full of love to me. I really don't know how else to say it besides I felt the presence of our ancestors in the room with us. Ayako shares some really beautiful stories about her late father, her late daughter. She shares incredible moments that she's had with her son with autism, who is basically a psychic medium. And if you listen to the telepathy files, you know that that is a very real thing that many families with children with autism experience. And so Ayako just taught me so much about how grief is a mystical portal and opportunity to individual and collective transformation. And I think I knew that conceptually before, but she really is the living embodiment of it. You may have also noticed that in previous episodes, I have been ending my conversations with a card pull from an oracle deck. And every time I've been using the Morning Calm Oracle by Korean diasporic shaman Seo Choi, which I need to have on this podcast, by the way. And in this episode, the cards really did their thing. The oracle cards were oracling. You'll have to listen to the end to experience it with us, but I'm just so humbled and honored that this conversation and these cards were able to be a container for Ayako's undying love for her late daughter. Even though her daughter is no longer earthside, their love remains robust, it remains alive, and it remains thriving to this day. And so as the host of this podcast, I am so thankful for Ayako's vulnerability, and I honor Ayako's daughter, Emmy, her father, who we also talk about in the episode, and all the ancestors from both of our lineages that were so obviously just showering our episode with care and love. We thank you also, CEO, for creating these cards. And again, with all the trigger warnings, do take care. I totally understand if you need to skip this episode or come back to it later. Either way, I appreciate you being here, and I hope you feel cared for, seen, and encouraged today. As a reminder, new episodes of Mothering New Worlds comes out every other Friday. That's new. Every Friday was unsustainable for me, y'all. So every other Friday, I think I can manage that. I'm on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends, drop this in your mom chat. You can also follow me at Mothering New Worlds on Instagram and Substack. Paid subscribers on Substack get an extra episode each month, and I promise June's extra episode is coming up. All of this is also in the show notes. Again, this is Mothering New Worlds with Bianca Mabute-Louie. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Ayako Gallagher.
My name is Ayako. Pronouns are she, they. I'm a mother of 3, 2 earthside and 1 in the stars that I lost in pregnancy. And I'm a speaker, decolonial grief guide, activist, late diagnosed ADHD. Pretty sure I'm also autistic. And yeah, all the fun mental health challenges that we all go through as well. I've been an activist for like 20 years. Really got into grief work after my daughter Emmy died. And I realized how intersectional grief is with collective liberation, with collective grieving and healing.
Yeah. I'm so interested in the grief work. We're totally going to talk about it. I wonder if there are family lineages, spiritual lineages, political lineages you come from that you want to share about.
I find it hard to answer in like a neat linear way because so much of my life is, I feel like, shaped by the connection and disconnection and feel like I'm always like skirting in like a liminal space. But my maternal lineage is Japanese. My paternal line is Irish, and they came to so-called Canada as opportunistic migrants. And so I lost a lot of that lineage and connection, which, we'll talk about about ancestral estrangement, that feeling of distance and loss. And I think that in-betweenness has followed me through in my identity, my belonging, even spiritually. And so I was always atheist, but now I'm agnostic. I think now, after literally birthing death, I have had to realize, it's been an honor to realize that there is something so much more than just our physical bodies. And I'm getting goosebumps everywhere. And then with organizing, I've been like organizing since I was a teenager. I think feeling disconnected and being like, why was I born here with all these privilege and other children are not? I always realize that, the suffering is never individual. It's always systemic and collective. And so I guess a lot of my thinking and has been influenced by decolonial thinkers, indigenous worldviews, and justice organizers. I think I'm like a big abolitionist now too, so that's fun. So big mix.
I'm curious also, I like to ground my conversations in place. And so you said you are based in Canada. I'm curious how you would describe what it's like to caregive, to organize where you are. And specifically, right, you talk about understanding your status as a settler. I'm come from immigrant parents in the United States. And right, like we're just conditioned to not think about us being on Indigenous stolen land. I think like reckoning with status as settler is something for me as like a children of immigrants, something I think only in the past few years, and especially after 2023 in Palestine, I've really started to confront what it means to be an immigrant and a settler. And I write about it in my book and stuff, but I'm curious for you, like what it's like caregiving where you are and just your relationship to the land and the identity of being a settler.
Yeah, I love that you start your podcast with this because, I feel colonialism and capitalism, it thrives on disconnection. It thrives on us being disconnected from our lands, from our culture. And it doesn't want us to confront the hard truths about the history of, living on Turtle Island. So, yeah, I live in what is colonially known as Richmond, British Columbia, and so-called Canada, which is just outside of Vancouver. And so for Americans, that's just north of Seattle. But all of these names, right, they're colonial markers on unceded territories. So I live on the unceded territories of the Musqueam Nation and other hunquemenium language-speaking nations. And I know I'm not sure if unceded is always used in the States. That means that land that was never lawfully transferred or surrendered through treaty or war. It was literally just taken and occupied without consent from the indigenous people who have always been the original caretakers and stewards since time immemorial. So, as a diasporic person, I hold a lot of complexity with living here because I'm ancestrally estranged and I'm longing for this village and belonging and rootedness. But also, I'm a beneficiary of colonialism for being here, right? And it's being honest, like what you said, that my parents were only able to immigrate here because of colonialism was already firmly entrenched on these lands. So the ability for us to immigrate here, like that did not emerge neutrally, right? That was built through like ongoing dispossession of indigenous land, their culture, their governance, community. So I feel marginalized within white supremacy, but I can also simultaneously benefit from it too.
Mhm, mhm,
So yeah,
mhm.
it's like always,
Yeah,
teetering on this, like, we can't collapse all our experiences of oppression
mhm.
together in a
Yeah,
way that erases indigenous reality.
yeah. How do you feel like that analysis shapes how you show up as a caregiver and mother?
On one hand, there's like where I am, there's incredible like mutual aid and there's cultural
Mm,
diversity and grassroots organizing and people trying to build alternatives to like the hyper
mm,
individualism, but there's total burnout.
yeah.
It's so expensive. I think it's more expensive to live in Vancouver or to buy here than New York.
Wow.
You know, that I live in a suburb, so I gotta deal with the suburban zombie moms. That's another sociological term I'm gonna trademark.
Yeah, that's
You know,
real.
is real, and so mothering here, it really like, inside these systems, it's like it's fundamentally not built for collective care. Like, families, it's isolating, and in my grief, and then COVID, it's like, it was so isolating, and we're overworked, so bereavement care isn't adequate, disability supports are inadequate, childcare is so inaccessible. But like I feel like we are emerging, mothering new worlds. Like there's this new like communal consciousness that's waking up in the parenting world, but also just in the human world as like we're all thinking like, whoa, we're settlers now. And wow, we're all holding these multiple conflicting collective griefs, for genocide, climate collapse, and housing crisis, rising fascism. And we're carrying as parents all this external grief while being expected to parent all alone, in like fake nuclear families that are just a total modern construct.
Yeah, yeah. You've brought up grief a few times, and honestly, this is one of the reasons why I was really excited to talk to you specifically, because
Mm.
there is no mothering, there is no organizing, there is no, manifesting a new world without grief and death. And I would love to hear you just talk a bit more about how you feel like you came to grief work. I know you mentioned your daughter, Emmy, earlier, and just what kind of role grief has played in your own politics, in what you feel like this collective awakening, collective consciousness raising that you're talking about.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I love grief. I love all the like really awkward like death. You want to talk about death? You want to talk about like heartbreak? Oh, like give it to me.
That is
Yeah.
also, yeah, that is also my bread and butter. I'm like, yes, let's dive right in.
Yeah. And because grief is
Mm,
like one of the most humanizing forces that connect all of us, no matter who
mm.
you are in this world. Hold on, my baby's here. Yeah, sure. Yeah. um yeah, so yeah, no matter who you are, you will endure grief, personal, interpersonal, collective. And I feel like grief is the portal for change. Grief is meant to be witnessed, and grief takes place in the communal. And once we realize the power within it, can move from that sinking into despair and then shift it and transform it into power and change. Because again, colonialism, capitalism, white supremacy, all these systems required us to suppress our grief. You know, no bereavement leave, keep it private, don't talk about it. Grief is a linear process. There's 5 stages and then get over it because they don't want it to slow down the machine. Unless you're buying a fancy coffin and making, taking part in capitalism for your grief. Grief, it asks us to feel and slow down. And like, we said at the beginning, like oppressive systems depend on the disconnection. And when we reconnect with our capacity with love and rage and care and responsibility, it's the most invigorating and like fire lighting kind of emotion I think anyone could ever experience. And then people are like, why are you making grief political? It's like grief is so political. Like, who is allowed to grieve publicly? Whose deaths are normalized? Which losses are recognized, and which are erased.
Do you feel like you've always been in touch with your grief? Were you always this person that was like, let's talk about death? Or like, did you have to come back around to it?
Actually, that's a great question. No, I was terrible. I was like the worst, like support person in grief. Like I was like, oh, don't, talk about death because I never spoke about death. My parents
Yeah.
never spoke about death. And I was a product of my situation. And so I never talked about it. I would lead with like, well, at least this or at least that. I would try to placate them. I would try to distract. And instead of just allowing friends and family to just sit in it. And I think there's something really important and validating when you can just tell someone like, that sucks. So sorry you had to go through that. And I'm here. We always think we have to like solve the problems and we forget how powerful that the witnessing can be. Like sitting with you and or being able to hear, the different stories on your podcast and read your book. Like there's so much power in being able to witness. And now with my kids, like Emmy died when my son was 2.5. And
Mm.
the ability that he has, like the capacity he has to
Mm.
hold grief and
Wow.
to feel comfortable asking the hard questions or feeling the hard feelings, it is so beautiful. Like he has taught me more about holding space
Wow.
for grief than I've ever been able to teach him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you see that? I mean, 2.5, that's actually about how old my kid is right now.
Mm.
And it also surprises me how much emotional capacity there is for like complex emotions that he shows. But I'm curious, yeah, for you, like how that was. And if you don't mind, I know you've talked about Emmy in the beginning of this and in other
Mhm.
spaces, but if you don't mind sharing a little bit more about your process, obviously, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Thank you for asking about Emmy. I love
Mm.
talking about her. Just as we love talking about any of our children.
Yeah.
And um had my son who's now almost 8. He's autistic, anxiety, all the things, but he's incredible. And he was always like really in tune with stuff. I think like autistic kids have this like power to
Mm-hmm.
really, and all children I feel have this spiritual connection. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then the world slowly sucks all the
Yes.
life out of them and then they become hard and jaded, jerky teenagers. But anyway, and then so I had him and then I got pregnant right away again with Emmy and everything was fine. And then almost into my 3rd trimester, something was wrong. I was being gaslit by my doctors. Don't worry about the bleeding. Don't worry about all this stuff. And then I found out she had actually died inside of me potentially many weeks prior. So there's that sense of like I wasn't even in tune with my own body, with my own baby, that I had been carrying her for maybe up to a month while she had already been dead, but my body wasn't letting her go. Um, and then, yeah, and then I had to go to the hospital on the first week. This was in 2020, first week of COVID up here, where they shut down everything for 3 weeks. That was like day one of when I went into the
My
hospital.
God.
So I was like by myself in the hospital. My husband's business had to shut or close down. Obviously, everything shut down for 3 weeks. And my son was like, "Where's mom? Where's Emmy?" And he had already been kind of connecting with my tummy. And um, I, yeah, it took 16 hours to labor and birth her because they still have to come out, right? Like I didn't even really think about that. So some people have C-sections, and I chose to have a natural birth, and I wanted to feel her,
Mhm.
since I didn't feel her for like a whole month. And I, even if it was pain, I wanted to feel some
Mm.
sort of connection with her. And my two other kids, I had another daughter after her, they're both C-sections. And so she
Mhm.
was my one baby where I got to have a
Well,
vaginal birth and feel the labor pains. And actually, the day that I drove myself back to the hospital, I started miscarrying or having the stillbirth. So it's like she knew, like, okay, like
wow.
now it's time. And I feel like there are so many like incredible things about
Mm.
her birth, death, because since everything shut down for COVID, I had like 3 weeks with my husband and my son just
Mm.
together hanging out. Although I will say it took about a week of like medical complications in the hospital. I lost like almost half my blood. I had to have
My
blood
gosh.
transfusions. And then they like locked me in a COVID ward because I had an infection with retained placenta because they were just
Mm.
like trying to like rip it out. And they're like, okay, hurry up, whatever. She's dead. Get out of here.
My God.
And so I had to go back. And then they, yeah, forgot about me in a like COVID. Like they had the whole, they didn't know what was going on. Right. So they had the
Mm.
whole
Mhm.
full body hazmat suits and
Mhm.
stuff. And I was like, "I have a fever from an infection. It's not
My gosh.
COVID." But, anyway,
Yeah.
it was terrifying and also beautiful. I think she, like, waited inside
Mm.
of me for, like, a month because she knew I would be better supported by my husband and son. And then, as for talking about grief and death afterwards, like, I think I'm a really frank, straight up person, and so I just spoke to him in, age appropriate ways of, yeah, like, baby, like Emmy died. Her body stopped working and she's not coming home in the way that we thought she would, but she's still a part of our family. And I really realize, how you're realizing that our kids can really actually handle a lot more than we give them credit for. And so that has shaped, me, and I've created an e-guide on how to talk to children about hard conversations around death or global injustices or, seeing things on the news. And we don't have to shy away from it and we don't have to lie. I think honoring them and speaking in a decolonial trauma informed way is for me the best way to talk to
Yeah.
kids.
Mothering, mothering,
Thank you so much for sharing about Emmy. I mean, that just sounds harrowing on many different
Yeah.
levels.
It's
Yeah, you said earlier grief is a portal, and how even for you, after that experience, I think you said you were atheist and then you became agnostic. I'm curious for you how that experience was a portal, or how even spiritually you came to understand death.
it felt like the most natural and logical thing to do. I think I feel like I haven't been, like, too in touch with a spiritual side before that, but then I don't know, there's something that just shifts in you when you give birth to life, you realize the power of the human body and the connection we have intuitively with our children that can't be explained. And then also birthing death, like I held death in my hands and it was just profound and it made me just feel so connected to not just Emmy, but like the universe and then, like, how like, energy doesn't ever disappear. So like, where did she go? And it's also neat to think that, there's a thing called microchimerism, and it's scientifically proven that your baby, if you have a baby in your womb, their cells migrate through the umbilical cord, placenta, whatever, into your body. And so any baby that you have, whether they made it out alive or not, their cells are still living inside of you.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just feel her all around me. My dad passed away in
Mm.
November, and he had Alzheimer's, and then for like 10 years, and then finally passed because of a 1 year, 8 month stint with terminal cancer. And I feel more connected to him. I feel him
Wow.
all around me now that he's dead,
Hmm.
from compared to like the last 4 years of his life. Like that was
Wow.
like my dad. I feel like he had already started to go. And I have a incredible, amazing Indigenous friend, Jada, and she had shared that, when your dad isn't here, when he's like doesn't remember who you are, and he's not really, you're like, that's not my dad. She's like, he's already begun his transition in, like, away from earthside.
Hmm.
So that's okay. He's just already transitioning. And
Wow.
then when they leave, when their body finally, that's the last, earthside step. But she's like, that's okay. Like, he's getting prepared, and it was such a beautiful way to remember, like, he's still my dad, and he's still doing his own journey. And then yeah, now when he left, yeah, he's just everywhere. And then I just realized yesterday was the 6 months anniversary since he died.
Mm.
And I've had a shitty couple of months. And yesterday was just like 10 amazing little things happen in a row. And that's
Mm.
going on today. And then at night, I was like, oh my gosh, it's dad's anniversary. And I just knew it was him, like, trying
Mm.
to make my day. So
I'm like tearing up right now. It's so special. And yeah, just struck by, I think, like the ways that the transmutation of pain and grief into like ongoing connection that you're talking about.
Mhm.
You said you feel them all around you. I'm curious if there are rituals you do or ways that you feel like you continue to cultivate that connection. And then if you want, we can also go into the ancestral estrangement and belonging. I feel like this is all kind of tied together with your
Yeah.
work too. Yeah.
So finding ritual and finding meaning and everything in these deaths for someone who is not really spiritual, who, I didn't grow up Buddhist, I didn't grow up Catholic or, Shinto or anything. So this really kind of goes into ancestral belonging, this way that we can sort of reconnect or redefine our ancestral connections in this modern world. So, yeah, I've been able to create new rituals, build in new traditions for Emmy and for my dad. And that it's cool because I feel so empowered that, like, I get to choose how much I want my daughter in our life or a part of our family as I want, like her ashes sit on the living room shelf right beside the TV. So she's always with us. And I take her ashes on the plane and on vacations with us. I have tattoos of her, and any photo, if I'm saying, okay, family photo, and then my son's like, okay, wait, let me grab Emmy, and she's just always here. We have a birthday for her. Every other person's birthday, she's giving a gift to her siblings. And so it's great. Like, I'm not defined by the lack of inclusive grief from my childhood. I get to redefine that, and that sort of, yeah, this ancestral belonging. So in the wake of ancestral estrangement, this concept of belonging is a way for me to describe how we can find new ways to reconnect lineage, culture, memory, community into the present. Because it's rooted in, like, the understanding that, okay, colonialism, capitalism has fragmented our communal life and hyper independence, productivity, nuclear family as a default. So the ancestral belonging, like, it's not about trying to return to a perfect, untouched past, right? Because that idea can just like deepen grief because I'll never become Japanese enough for Japanese people. Like I've endured more racism from Japanese people to me than white people. And because of all those things being disrupted, it's just not realistic. So instead I question like how can we move forward and to invite us to shift the question of like, how do I go back to like become more Japanese or Irish? But it's like, how do I carry my ancestors with me now? So that could look like making my own rituals or like I make little altar shelves to normalize bringing ritual and grief and ceremony into everyday life. It can, making my dad's favorite foods as a reminder or reading books about grandparents or children who are not earthside and making friends with other lost moms. That's been incredible. Oh yeah. So I like made an app. I forgot about this. I made an app. It was the first app in the
Just
world
casually made an app.
to that like provided emotional support for bereaved parents
Wow.
after pregnancy, infant loss, TFMR, elected loss.
Mhm,
And yeah, because I realized like there's not enough out there to hold space for this
mhm.
grief. And when after Emmy died, it was like, okay, after about a couple weeks, a month, 2 months, people are like, they stopped asking about her. They stopped, it's like, get back to work, go do, enjoy you, at least you have a living son. So I was like, well, I'm not freaking done talking about her. Like, I'm not done grieving. Grief is it's a lifelong emotion and path. And we just need to learn how to make it not so heavy in our backpack of shit we carry through life. It doesn't have to be the pile of rocks. Like it can be the stuff actually lift things up. It can be the straps on our shoulders that keep us steady.
Can you talk more about your app? I'm so curious. I'm
Oh
sure it
yeah.
has
Well,
cultivated so much community for parents going through this.
yeah, it was great and it's shut down now because it's really expensive to run an app and I just didn't have like the business acumen or like the drive, the capitalist drive to like make money off grieving parents and
How
stuff.
dare you not try to make money off it?
Um, and which is like, it's such a shame because it was so amazing. I was, I still have I'm going to re-release all the information on it, but we had like about 10 different workshops every month led by grief coaches and therapists and yoga instructors. And it was just integrating grief and trying new things that may make it less heavy and like to be able to ask and answer the super like hard questions like what do you do when your milk comes in? Like what do you do when you have a postpartum body and no baby to show for it? So like all those hard things that people forget uh, about, not having your baby earthside. But yeah, so now I feel like that grief work has opened, that door has sort of shut for now, but it's opened up this other work of like, how can we help our living children hold space for grief? How can we as parents hold space for our grief of being so fucking burnt out and like trying to be like the perfect parents and when we're just drowning? And now it's like I really want all of us to honor that, like, and realize it's not our fault. It's a systemic structural result of living in this stupid post-capitalist crumbling world. So now I'm sort of, yeah, doing more work around holding space for collective grief, holding space for parents and how to um rebuild the village.
Yeah. I kind of want to return to what you talked about with the grief of even just what you mentioned, right? Like what happens when your milk comes in, or like the embodied experience of this loss is something I
Mhm,
feel like we just don't hear a lot about, or it's stigmatized
mhm.
or shamed
Yeah.
systemically. And I'm curious for you, like what were things that were helpful for you during that time, or even how the embodied experience of your loss, how you got through that, or how it maybe continues to show up.
Yeah, you're right, like an embodied loss where it made me realize that, the grief is not just a cognitive place to live. It's like actually in our bodies, especially with pregnancy and infant loss and TFMR, which is termination for medical reasons. Honestly, it is so sad how hard it was for me to find information back, in 2020. And still it is because grief, and especially grief that has anything to do with women or,
Yeah.
the female body, is so taboo.
Yeah.
And I just think it's such bullshit. And
Yeah.
it's because like a man built the system. And I think being able to reclaim our grief and to say, like, hey, this happened, that really sucked, and I'm not okay. You know, being able to like own our grief again, it's taking the power away from the system to be like, yep, and shut up and be a good little housewife. Like, no, I'm not going to. I'm going to really allow this to shape me. And I think by being able to, use grief as that portal, as that catalyst for change, and I mean collective change, but it's also like individual change. How can I honor Emmy through my grief in how I'm living like today? Now, I honor her by talking to her about my children. I honor her by making, my kids realize that there are children dying in Palestine and their mom had a miscarriage and she didn't have any medication. Like, wow, can you imagine what she's feeling? And it's using our grief as that light. And,
Yeah.
what's so cool, like, just an example of how our children are so much more wise and in tune than we could ever try is, so one night I was sitting in bed, I co-sleep with my kids, and I think I was looking at my phone, I was like I was crying silently, and my son looked at me and I was like, yeah." He's like, "Are you crying?" I'm like, "Yeah, mommy's crying.
Mhm.
Mommy's sad because there's, a lot of families and children that are getting hurt in Gaza right
Mhm.
now, and it makes me so sad because now they're dead like Emmy."
Mm.
And he's like, thinks for a second and he says, "Mummy, but they're not alone. You know that, right?" And I was like,
Mm.
"Oh, what do you mean by that?" He's like, "Well, Emmy goes over there every night and she flies from here to Gaza, and she can fly there in about 4 seconds. It's pretty fast because she's by herself. But when she comes home, it takes her maybe about 10 seconds because she's carrying all the children that have been killed that day. And she brings them into our house and she lets them play with all of our toys. And she opens the fridge and lets them eat all of our food. And then they can have lots of fun. So, Mummy, it's okay. Don't be sad. They're not alone." And he's like, "But they don't eat the chicken nuggets. Those are dad." I was like, "We don't even have chicken nuggets." But anyway, it was just so funny. He was like,
Wow.
"Hey, they're not alone." And it's like, yeah, it makes us also it recenters them as like beautiful whole individuals rather than like, oh, these poor, like, I mean,
Yeah.
they are poor victims, but like not putting ourselves above them and looking down on them. It's like, hey, they're on their next journey and they're not like Emmy's with them. It was just really lovely.
Yeah, I mean, that's profound. That's just yeah, there's not really anything else I can say to that, I feel
Right?
like. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, he's like, I'll tell you another really cool story. This is just so random. You don't even have to use this, but like I feel he has always been really in tune with I don't know, that spiritual side. And so maybe
Yeah.
he's been teaching me more about spirituality
Mm.
that maybe Emmy has and before Emmy has. Because yeah, another thing about Palestine, I was watching something on my phone, doom scrolling in bed,
Mhm.
and I had my headphones on
Mhm.
and then he was like, sorry, I don't know how to tell the story. Anyway, he like stopped me and he's like, "Mummy, do you hear them?" And
Hmm.
I was like, "What, baby?" And he's like, they're screaming. I can hear them screaming, mommy. And he's like, I was like, okay, baby. And he was just like, okay. And like, it was just like, he was
Mhm.
like connected, like in this portal to Gaza. And which
Wow.
was strange because like I had not told him a couple weeks prior to, I had closed my eyes and I had actually heard mothers and children screaming. And
Mhm.
I was like, I knew it was in Gaza, like at that moment.
Mhm.
And then he had the same experience, but I
Mhm.
never told him. Anyway, so profound.
Wow.
I know, right? And then I was like, this is also totally random, but we were on my baby moon in Hawaii, and he was in my tummy. I had
Mhm.
prepartum depression, so like
Mhm.
I wanted to like have an abortion. I was so depressed. I was suicidal. It was horrible. Anyway, I'm standing there in Hawaii, trying to like be a happy baby moon, and I'm standing in the waves, and the waves are crashing onto my tummy, probably a bit too hard, and I'm like tearing up, and it's sunset. I'm like, Takeo, are we doing this? Is this
Mhm.
happening? Like, we're in this, like, together. We're gonna do this. And then he was, like, like two, like, just started talking, or I don't know when did children talk. Maybe he wasn't two, maybe he was three. But he was like, I was like talking to my mom about, oh, da da da, Hawaii. He's like, I've been there. I'm like, no, Takeo,
What?
you haven't. He's like, I've been there. And I was like, no, you haven't. This was before you were born. And I didn't tell him I was pregnant. I was like, this is before you were born. He's like, no, mommy, I was there with you. We were in the waves. And we were swimming together in really strong waves. I was there, mom. And you were
This is a
talking.
gifted child. He's
Oh,
like,
right?
"Duh.
I
Don't you
know.
remember?"
And I was like,
Oh,
oh my. And he explained that moment, which I never told
what?
him, like to a T. I know.
This is
He's
so
incredible.
incredible.
Yeah.
I'm so moved
So
by this. So I did not expect to talk this much about
I
spirituality,
know,
but
I
I
know. Sorry, me
love
neither.
no, I love it because I was really, really Christian for a while. And then it was really traumatizing. And so I left, I like shut that door, I left everything behind. And I think in the last few years, I have had this like spiritual curiosity, thirst that is just like unquenchable. And I do think a lot of it is because of the existential questions that confronting empire, just
Yeah.
witnessing children be killed by my tax dollar in
Yes.
Palestine, right? It's forced these larger questions.
Hmm.
It's forced me to, I think, really reckon with like life and death and evil. I don't know how else to describe it. What you share, it moves me so much because I think also for me, like after I was religious and I like shut that door, I like turned really heavily into like organizing and my academic career and getting my PhD, and everything was like, oh, let me have like the correct political analysis and surround myself with like abolitionists, all this stuff. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, I need something bigger than myself still to make sense and even
Mm.
survive this moment. And this is just as a witness of genocide, not as someone going through it. And I
Yeah.
think also bearing witness to the profound spiritual fortitude of Palestinians too.
Yes.
It was just very like paradigm shifting for me and just like me returning back to that spiritual curiosity and need, I think, to like have some kind of greater spiritual connection or framework to make sense of all of this. And part of it has been like ancestral reconnection. But yeah, I'm curious if you had any thoughts on that, or even just like the collective moment of grief we're in, like COVID, the genocide, everything, right? Our
Mhm.
systems dismantling and crumbling, unemployment. I've never had so many people in my life laid off, you know? Like there's so much grief on every level. And I'm curious, like, if you had any thoughts on how maybe we're in like a portal moment.
Totally. I know I have a super spiritual friend. She does like tapping. She used to do it on the app and it's like profound. I was like, this is totally hocus pocus. And then she's like, let me do a session on you. And I was like bawling and I was like, this is amazing. Anyway, she said that we're like in this portal time. But I feel what you say resonates so much with this like this underlying thirst or desire or like longing for something more than just us, something more than just, ticking off the check boxes of like, okay, buying a house or, renting a house, getting a car, getting a job. having a kid, okay, I guess that's life. Oh, wow, I'm going to save up for a new dishwasher. Like, no, there's got to be something more. And I think it is this underlying ancestral net tethering that we have always had to our ancestors and to these lost lineages. And that's sort of what I talk about in this, my phrase of ancestral estrangement. And I think we're all starting to hear like the whispers or feel that feeling and wonder like what it is. And so I describe the disconnection that many of us are experiencing from ancestral, cultural, familial, spiritual, like communal roots is, because of the colonization, the forced assimilation, voluntary or involuntary migration, capitalism, whiteness. And so I use the term estrangement because it comes from the French idea of like how to become or like to make or become of a stranger, estrangement. But the Latin roots, extraneous, is it means something bigger than just an interpersonal thing. It means like extra, like extraneous, the becoming external, becoming outside of. So we have become foreign to what was once familiar. And so I think there's been a severing of our sense of self because we've become not only a stranger to ourselves or to other people, but we've become strangers and foreign to land, to culture, to memory, to communal belonging. It's what you said, like you're racially nowhere and everywhere. And it's like we don't know where we fit in anything. So yeah, I mean, I think that my concept comes a lot from like decolonial thinkers, critical sociology and kinship and belonging. And, I think it looks like when we feel like we've like lost our ancestral language. I was never taught Japanese, where we feel disconnected from, like mourning practices. Like, what do we do when one dies? Where maybe we don't even know our family background because came, from Africa as an enslaved lineage. Like, or there's shame around our ethnicity and all this stuff. So I think we're all carrying a lot of grief for things that we can't even name because also that severing could have happened generations ago, right? Like it wasn't us that chose to come here. It was either our parents or grandparents. And so that's, disconnected us so much more. And yeah, I think it's like, again, how do we get to redefine what spirituality means now? Like, we don't need to fit into, I mean, if somebody wants, organized religion, great. But like, we get to decide how spirituality can show up, how reverence can show up in like a way that makes sense. Um, Modern world and as like settlers, like what does it mean to be responsible to the land that we're on? How do we integrate that responsibility as a settler and our identity as a settler to our children? How are we going to teach them like read them indigenous books or show up to powwows and celebrate the thriving indigenous culture um, that's still here?
How do you talk to your children about these things, or how do you instill this like consciousness in them?
So how I kind of realized I frame my conversations with my kids is I made up a little like acronym because I love those. And it's rooted, ROOTED, just to sort of like be a compass in holding space for big conversations. And that's what I go through in my e-guide, which is what is it called? Raising Resilient Hearts, a practical guide for conversations on justice and global struggles. And so to stay rooted in your conversation with your child, I mean, first, take a fucking breath because sometimes it can catch us off guard. Like, what does genocide mean, mom? Like, I don't know. And if anyone's like me, like, I would just, before Emmy and before all this grief work, it's like I would just start rattling off and over explaining or, pacifying them. But now, so how I try to ground myself is so R is for reassuring safety. letting your child know that they are loved and protected. Sometimes that's all they need to know. Our kids are just like, "Does this affect me? Is this gonna happen to me?" Like, "Hey, baby, like, we're safe. You're safe right now. Everyone's healthy." Oh, first O is, offer honesty. So speaking truthfully in age-appropriate ways, broken down on their neurological development. And then the other O is to open space for expression, so encouraging kids to share their feelings through words or play or art. T is trusting their pace. Kids are like, they learn in tiny snippets. So letting them come around to the questions or the feelings when they're ready. We don't need to info dump on them. I think like one great tool that I learned from a child life therapist was if they ask you a question, Mommy, what does genocide mean? You're like, oh my God, I need to info dump, do all this stuff. To first start with curiosity. So trusting, you know, being like, hmm, what do you think genocide means? And then it really allows you to see where they're at. Maybe all they care about is like, they just want security and safe, reassurance and that they're safe. You are about to share about all about, the US industrial military complex and war machine. And you're like, okay, and then it's like, does it mean that they're hurting people? Like, yes, there's a group, some people are hurting other people just for who they are. And it's not fair. And it's not nice. And you're safe right now. And then so root, so ED, so E is engage in cultural practices, leaning into your family stories or traditions, mm, reminding them, like, not everyone who wears a uniform actually is safe. But we're safe when we are with, our people and our aunties and uncles, and this is how our community stays together. And the D is demonstrating care. So modeling the compassion, modeling activism and advocacy. And I mean, doing all these things, you don't have to do that every single time a kid asks a question, of course, right? But sometimes they just need one or two things. More just a way of being like, you know, sometimes they may have capacity for deeper questions, or like maybe they'll want that cultural connection. Or, you can find a book on like how Japanese people grieve. And then it's like, then you bring it up then. More a way of, centering curiosity, centering connection, trusting intuition, and not worrying about being perfect. I think showing them that we're human or that we want to rehash things is way more of a learning, teaching moment
Yeah.
than.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all we can do really is honor our own humanity and that we flop and we don't know the answers.
Yeah.
I feel like I could talk to you forever and ever.
Oh my God, me too.
Do you, before we move into the oracle reading part of the conversation, do you want to share a bit about your course? You've mentioned your course offerings, your e-guide.
Um, I am going to be hosting a fall cohort in the latter half of 2026 on sort of exactly what we're talking about.
Mm.
So it's going to be called Repairing the Break, Reclaiming the Village in a World of Disconnection. So, how do we get to reimagine this ancestral belonging? How do we get to create safety and community in our worlds that make sense to us?
Mhm.
So, I'm super excited about that because, now it's hard to meet like real life
Yeah.
friends.
Yes.
So it's okay to start making friends and community virtually. It
Mhm.
doesn't, that's part of,
Mhm.
adapting to
Yeah.
this like modern world. And then I have my e-guide that goes through like there's over 100 scripts and 50 affirmations for kids. That's online to hold space for conversations if people want. Like I wrote an article, it was up just like last month or two on Greenpeace, and that's on parenting in a crumbling world. And so there's
Mm.
affirmations there for free to help you get through it. So yeah, there's lots of ways. And then I'm on Instagram, and my handle is Mamas Matter Here, although everybody matters. I hate that handle. I just can't. I refuse to pay for the blue check. And then I also started doing pottery, which is another way of
Cool.
how I incorporate and express my grief. So that's
Mm,
called Fed Up Potter.
I love that. Amazing. I'll make sure to link all of those in the
Yeah,
show
for
notes.
sure. Thanks. I'll
Yeah.
give you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited
Okay.
about this oracle thing.
Yeah, so these cards, this is from the Morning Calm deck by this Korean shaman named Seo Choi. And so I'll
Ooh.
just give it a little shuffle. As I do this, I have to ask, are you into astrology? Do you know your chart?
I had someone. I don't really know anything
Okay.
about it. No, but my friend, she did a life path reading or something
Hmm,
where it was like astrology and numerology like layered up
cool.
together. Yeah, it was so cool. She like saw into my past lives stuff. It was
Oh,
very cool.
wow.
Yeah.
I just ask because you were just giving me like strong Scorpio energy. And I'm a Scorpio
Oh.
rising and relate a lot to that. So I just like going into the taboo obsession with death and grief. I'm like, yes,
Yeah,
you're my people.
I'm Virgo, but I'm like right at the end. I'm August
Uh-huh.
28th. I don't know what's after me. Or right at the beginning. I have no
Mm,
idea. Yeah.
ooh, Libra, maybe. Anyways,
Yes.
okay, I'm gonna pull a card for you. Let's see. Lead with joy. And I'll read the little
Oh
description that
my
she.
god, no way.
Does this
No
mean
way.
something to
Okay.
you?
Bianca is holding up a card where there's a little girl. Oh my god, I'm gonna cry. That's like Emmy. It's a little girl in a dress in a field, and it's with her back to us, and she's like running through a field of flowers. Oh my god. Yeah.
Wow.
That's like how she often shows up to.
Hmm.
Oh my god, I have to send you a picture of. Okay, I'll let you do your thing. Sorry.
That's wild. I mean, I will send a picture of this for you too.
Yeah.
I feel like she's here with us.
Oh my gosh, that is.
Felt that earlier too.
Oh my god.
Oh,
Okay, what
okay.
is it? What does it say? Sorry, I cut you off.
Lead. No, you're good. I love that it sparks something for you. It says, lead with joy. Follow the feelings of joy and happiness in your heart. Instead of relying on your brain and logic, rely on what skips your heart with joy, inspiration, and love. When trying to decide your next steps, tune into what sparks positive feelings in your heart. Have the courage and openness to follow what feels good. Invite energies of joy into your field. And the affirmation is, I am filled with joy and I express happiness. I enjoy myself.
Oh my gosh, that's so nice.
Hmm.
Wow. Thanks. That's like me starting this whole pottery journey.
Wow.
I'm like, I gotta
Amazing.
do what? Yeah. Holy crap.
Well, thank you, Emmy, for speaking to us and I feel
Yeah.
like being with us in this conversation.
Thanks for channeling her.
Oh my
Holy.
gosh. Thank you so much, Ayako. This time was so special. I have loved talking to you, and I really, really appreciate just how much you shared and sharing your father and Emmy with us during this time. So thank you. That was Mothering New Worlds with me, your host, Bianca Mabute-Louie. If you resonated with this conversation, would you rate 5 stars? Would you like, subscribe, share with your friends, share on your stories? New episodes come out every other Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And we're at Mothering New Worlds on Instagram and Substack. This is an entirely independent podcast by me, Bianca Mabute-Louie. Music for this podcast was made by Zarina Jimenez, and the logo was designed by Vanita Agrawal. Thank you for being here, and I'll catch you next time.